All right. Thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear me and see me. Sorry I couldn't make it in person. I injured my back last minute, and I couldn't fly just like the day right before I was supposed to fly. So thank you for all the accommodations to help me out here. But yeah, thank you for the introduction. My name is Pablo, and I'm very excited to talk about one of my favorite TV shows ever, Sex and the City. Fair warning, there will be spoilers coming ahead. The show has been out for like 18 years, so I'm not really going to apologize about that. You should all watch it. For those that don't know, Sex and the City was a show that came out in 1998, ran until 2004. It was a cultural phenomenon at the time. It was a trailblazing show that was very unapologetic in how it showed how women were navigating sex and relationships at the time, while older shows such as Golden Girls may have touched on these topics. Sex and the City was the first that was really very explicit and unapologetic about it in showing how they were discussing sex toys, different sex acts, their sexual encounters, and things like that, almost on a every almost on every episode. And they were normalizing these conversations, which made it wonderful. In addition, what also made it very groundbreaking was that it was showing all the different ways that women at the time could choose to exist in society. But importantly, it was highlighting all of these as equally valid and admirable and all decisions worthy of respect. This whole friend group consisted of women with very different outlooks on sex and relationships and goals in life and dreams, but all of them equally deserving of love. So the characters, just as a quick introduction here, are Carrie Bradshaw, the protagonist, Miranda Hobbs, Charlotte York, and Samantha Jones, and their respective partners that they end up with. Harry Goldenblatt, Steve Brady, Big, and Jerry Smith Jared. These are the main core 8 characters kind of by the end of the show. But it had one fatal flaw. It believed that each person could only end up with one other person. And you kind of see this throughout the show. They go through so much painful emotional experience. Started to think what could happen if they could have found a happily ever after with more than one person instead. Why this whole show, 6 seasons and 3 movies, was there only one person for each other person? But also I lied, there's a second fatal flaw. This makes absolutely no sense. It never made sense to me that Carrie and Big should have ended up together. I highly disagree with it, and really this whole talk is an excuse to prove that. And that is what we're gonna end up focusing on. But anyways, I digress. I couldn't help but wonder, what if all of these characters could be in relationships with more than one person? What if they were polyamorous? Let's the concept, what is a polycule? A polycule for people that are polyamorous is essentially a romantic or intimate relationship that consists of more than 2 people. If they were polyamorous, we're trying to figure out what is the ideal combination, that leads to the question then of, like, who are the people that are going to be involved in that combination? Which means how do we calculate that? How do you calculate what is a compatible polycule? How do we get all the possible combinations and calculate which one is more ideal, which one is more stable than the other? And the idea of compatibility has already been done in other dating apps. Think OkCupid, where you can actually get your one-on-one compatibility. You can see if you're a 90%, 98% match with someone else. That idea of one-on-one compatibility has been done, but nobody's done compatibility for a polycule. And this is a huge chance for innovation. So this is actually where VCs should be spending all of their money in. Stop thinking about AI, stop thinking about blockchain. This is what we gotta be doing right now. This is where the money is. It's time to disrupt polyamory. Let's figure out how we actually calculate a compatible polycule. So, introducing, for the first time ever, the polycule compatibility score. So, as a good researcher, is figure out what makes a good relationship. So I just Googled relationship characteristics, and then I scrolled down half a page and I clicked on the very first link. That was the extent of my literature review. I took those 14 characteristics from the reputable website, mindbodygreen.com, that I had never heard of before, but they said these were scientifically proven, so I believe them. These are the 14 characteristics that make a good relationship. You can debate me on it. I didn't put that much thought into it. Really, I put all the thought in what's coming next. How do we take these 14 characteristics, boil it down into a number of compatibility? So let's think about what is a polycule score. Let's start with a basic concept of just average. Let's say that the molecule's compatibility score is the average of its score on each trait. So there's 14 traits, you get an honesty score, you get an affectionate score, respect score, and all of that. Average all of that, that's your polycule score. Let's start with that assumption. Great. Now let's complicate it a little. What does it mean for a polycule to have an honesty score, an affectionate score? Well, the naive way is they say there's three people in the polycule. Each person has a score on honesty, and you average their honesty scores, and that is the polycule score for honesty. Each person has a score on how affectionate they are. You average their scores. That is the polycule's affectionate score. All right, that's a good start. So now what we have is an average of averages. For each trait, we get the average of the score that each person got for that trait. And that is the whole polycule score, which obviously means that I went through all the 8 characters of Sex and the City and I ranked and I rated them on each one of these traits. And you can imagine how I rated Big. Not good. So, but then so far all I've done is really just measured how good are the people. That's not really telling me if people are compatible, right? Like 2 terrible people could still be compatible together. So we have to take into account this concept of importance. How important is a trait to you? For example, somebody can be really affectionate, but maybe being affectionate is just not an important trait in the relationship for me. So that doesn't necessarily make it super compatible. Maybe you are terrible at being affectionate, but since I really don't care about that very much, for example, big, that is actually totally fine and it is actually pretty good for our relationship. So we have to modulate this by how important a trait is to you. And so now this is where we're capturing the concept of interactions. It's not just measuring how good people are at traits, but also we're modulating that by how important your potential partner finds that trait. It's good if you're good at a trait that's important. If you're bad at a trait that is important, that's really bad. If you're bad at a trait that's unimportant, doesn't matter as much. But now we have to introduce a new concept, the reward function, which I am calling the you did good reward function. Because so far, everything that we have is strictly punitive. Basically, if you're not perfect, you can't get 100%, and that's not realistic, right? Relationships are not just a series of deal breakers. There have to be ways that you are more compatible if you are good at something that your partner finds important. If they really value and you are a really honest person, that is incredibly good for your relationship. If they really, really value empathy or quality time and you are capable of giving that willingly, that's extremely good for your relationship. So what I do here is that if something is important, I then reward that relationship. I figure out how far away they were from perfect. I scale it by a certain factor, and you get some of those points back, basically. I know this is all very complicated equation. You can go to the GitHub and you can read the whole methodology in detail. But then the last thing is now we also have to consider that polycules have their own sense of stability. So I'm introducing a concept called the chaotic energy factor. Think of like a nucleus. We're all protons in this nucleus pulling against each other. The more we pull, the less stable it is. Anybody who's watched Steven Universe knows this concept that like relationships are their own entity. They are more than just some of their parts. So what I do here is with the chaotic energy factor is I figure out how different everyone is across each trait. Basically getting the root, the mean squared error of that. I modulate it by how important this trait is on average, and then I scale the entire score by that. So the more different everyone is, the more chaotic the polycule, the lower your score ends up being. The more stable the polycule, the better. And so, just like that, this is the whole algorithm, the whole equation. We solved it. This is how you calculate polycule compatibility. But now that leaves us with a question: who is the ideal polycule? So, of course, I built an app for this. This is the only way to solve the question. I'm not just going to get a CSV about this. So, I built a dashboard. You can go to the QR code. You can check it out. And we see that the best polycule is Harry, Steve, and Charlotte. They are the best polycule in Sex and the City, and we figured it out. You can click on this. You can actually see who are what the most compatible traits are, the least compatible ones. You see, even on the least compatible, they're all still pretty compatible. This is great. I am so happy for Carrie, Steve, and Charlotte. I would watch a show about those three. Now let's figure out where is Carrie and Pig. Let's choose in this drop down every possible polycule combination. Scroll all the way down out of 247 possible combinations. Big and Harry is third to last. So mathematical proof that Big and Carrie did not deserve to be together They were a terrible match, and that is not how the show should have ended. Which then leads to the last question of all to wrap up the presentation, is then who Carrie should she have ended up with? We can show polycules that only have Carrie and find out that her best match is a five-person polycule between Smith, Harry, Steve, Charlotte, and Carrie. So actually, the show writers should have had the whole show end in a five-person polycule, and then we could have truly believed that Carrie was fighting for happily ever after with these four incredible other. So thank you all very much. Please check out the app, read the whole methodology on GitHub, and if you want to see any other my random hobbies, I enjoy doing pole dance. You can check that out on Instagram. So thanks.